What's up guys, I'm Kel, Red Zone Rogue, and welcome to another Force of Will strategy video. As you probably guessed by the title of the video, as well as what I'm holding right in front of you, today's video is a Taegrus Pearl Shine Mono White, that's not really, it's Mono White Splashing Darkness Panda deck. This deck is actually one of the ones that topped a GP in Rome, which is actually pretty sweet, which means that this deck is, you know, a little bit competitive at the very least. I think this deck is really cool, and, you know, I think it has a good place in the future metagame. With that said, this is a Reiya cluster only deck. There are not any cards from Lapis cluster, because the tournament in Rome was a Reiya cluster tournament. So with all that out of the way, let's get on with the deck. So of course the ruler is Taegrus Pearl Shine, and I'm pretty excited to go over a Taegrus deck because this is the last Reiya cluster starter deck ruler I have yet to make a deck video for. But anyway, yeah, he's a ruler panda. That's actually relevant that the ruler itself is a panda. He's a judgment of 2 light and 1 of any. He's an energize of a light, and he says at the beginning of the game, gain a gem of any attribute. And he also has a sealed item. It's called Rainbow Jewel. Whenever a panda enters the field under your control, gain a light gem. And you can only do this once per turn. Usually, the first gem you start out with, I like to do like a fire, or maybe it's usually like a fire, sometimes darkness, because of some of the cards that we have in the deck, and we're going to be generating a lot of light gems regardless with his sealed Rainbow Jewel ability. His J ruler side is pretty sweet. Taegrus Pearl Shine, Lord of the Mountain. He's an 800. It's kind of small, but he has ways to pump himself up. He's a J ruler panda. He says when this card enters the field, gain 2 gems of any 1 attribute. Banish a light gem. This card gains plus 500 until end of turn. Play this ability only once per turn. You can banish a water gem and give him flying. Then he has 2 sealed abilities. The first one is Rainbow Jewel. Banish a darkness gem, and you can give a J Resonator minus 500 until end of turn, which is pretty sweet. Or his second Rainbow Jewel ability is banish 2 light gems, and you can recover him. Play this ability only once per turn. So you can do like a big Voltron strategy, building up gems, banishing gems, and then just like, you know, pumping them up, giving them flying, attack your opponent, recovering him, attack your opponent, play another card in the deck that we run that recovers him, attack your opponent again. But we're mostly going to be like swarming the board with pandas. This is a heavily resonator deck. It's kind of like a aggro mid-range almost style deck with some of the pandas that we're running. But you know, if all else fails, you can still finish the game with good old Taegrus here and his shiny little brooch. All right, let's continue with the stones of the deck. And before I go on any further, I just want to let you know, if you are looking for a sideboard, I'm not going to be covering it in the video, but there is one in the description down below. It's in, you know, a gacha log or whatever, so you can check that out if you do plan on playing this competitively. But anyway, for the magic stones, we are running ore from the treasure mountain. This is a pretty obvious one for a panda deck because, you know, you gain gems from it, and we are running a full playset of these. Pretty good. We are running also 4 of the Magic Stone of Hope. And the reason we're running this is because we're running 2 inverse darkness cards. And this is also, you know, an inverse darkness card. Basically what it does is whenever you do a judgment of your ruler, you invert the card, and it normally produces a light will. When you invert it, it can produce a light or a darkness. So, you know, that is pretty good. And it just helps us use the one... or it helps us cast the one darkness spell that we have in the deck. And then, of course, round it off with just 2 light magic stones with awesome art. I mean, that cannot be understated. This is most excellent art. Oh, and once again, we are not running any of the actual dual stones because this is a Reiya cluster deck, and those are not legal in Reiya cluster. So let's kick off the resonators with one of the cutest and best in the entire deck. This is the Gem Mallet Panda. He's got a giant fucking mallet. He's a 100 for 1 light will. He's a panda. When this card enters the field, gain a gem of any attribute. And that could just be any attribute for whatever situation you need, because there is one card that really wants specific colored gems. We'll get to that near the end of the video. But you can also rest him and banish a gem to produce a will of an attribute shared with that gem. So you can kind of like, you know, he's kind of like a ramp card, which is pretty sweet. You know, with Taegrus' ability, him coming into play gets you 2 gems. So that's pretty sweet. And he also has a banish 3 gems that share an attribute. And then you produce 2 will of the attribute that was the gem. So you can, you know, you have different ramp possibilities. We are running a full playset of him. And he's just a really, really good 1-drop for the deck. Next, we run a full playset of the Technic Gem Warrior. It's a 1-drop panda, 300 as barrier, and this card gains +100 as long as you control 2 or more pandas. And we will always control 2 or more pandas because our ruler is a panda, And this card is a panda, and so that means we have 2 pandas. So this card always gets plus 100, plus 100. So basically, it's a 400, 500 for 1 will with barrier. That is super good. Not quite as good as the last one, but the Power Gem Warrior is another pretty good inclusion. We only run 2 of him. He's a 400, 300 with first strike, and he has the same ability. So this card gains 100, 100 as long as you control 2 or more pandas, and we will always control 2 or more pandas with this on the field. So he's a 500, 400 first strike for 1. Pretty good. First strike isn't quite as good as barrier because there's so much removal running around in the game right now, but it's still like really good and another excellent 1-drop. This deck has a lot of powerful 1-drops. Next up we have my girl, Orphica, Dancer in the White Mist. This card is, you know, very good. Other than being like very good looking, it's a pretty good card. So she is a 400, 400 for 2 light. She's a Dragonoid. This is one of the only light, or the only resonators in the entire deck that isn't a panda, but she gives all pandas we control plus 200, plus 200. That's pretty sweet. And when this card also enters the field, you can remove a resonator from the game at the next end of turn, put it back into the field. So we can actually abuse any of our enter effects with this card, or we can use it to remove one of our opponent's blockers from the game. So we can like smash in for some, you know, good panda damage. And it also says when this card is put into the graveyard from the field, search your deck for a panda, reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle your deck. This card is excellent. At only 2 will, she's just a fantastic card and does everything we want to do in the deck. And, you know, we obviously are running a full playset of Orphica. Next up is a 2 of Holy Princess Nanny Citron. She is a quick cast panda for 2 will. She's a 500, 700. Here's the little prince behind her. This is pretty cute. When this card enters the field, prevent the next 500 damage that will be dealt to target J Resonator or yourself this turn. That's pretty good. We're only running 2 of them. It's not like a super powerful card. The stats are okay for the 2 will, but it is like a surprise blocker, and she prevents damage, and she can like mess up combat math, and she can mess up like a whole bunch of different stuff. You know, preventing spells from dealing damage. Like, this is a pretty good like catch-all defensive card, and you can also, you know, do it as a surprise attacker if you place it at the end of your opponent's turn, so you can attack immediately on your turn. So yeah, pretty good. Next up we have one of my favorite cards in the deck because it does everything that this deck wants to do. This is the Gem Minister Garnet. She's a 500, 900 panda for 3 light. It says when this card enters the field, gain a gem of any attribute and draw a card. So it replaces itself, and you get a gem, and you get a decent body. She's not too big, but she has a big butt. She has 900 defense. That's pretty good. That's enough to withstand a lot of removal spells. And, you know, like I said, replaces itself, and you gain an extra gem. Just a solid card. Next, we have a 2 of Jjang, the Holy Prince. And probably is contention for one of the best arts in this deck, though, as I knock the camera, though this card is not super good. But it's okay. He's an 800 for 3 will, 2 light, 1 of any. He's a panda, obviously. When this card enters the field, reveal any number of pandas from your hand, and then you gain 200 life for each card revealed this way. And it also says whenever you gain life, you may banish a light gem. If you do, this card deals damage to target resonator equal to the number, or to the amount of life you gained. So, I believe that this trigger is only 1 trigger. So you will gain a lump sum of life. So say you reveal 3 pandas, you will gain 600 life. You won't gain 200, and then 200, and then 200. So you can only banish 1 life gem for him entering the field, but it's still pretty good. You can like easily kill a dude, and that's kind of what we want to do. And he has decent stats for only 3 will. And he also has a God's Art, Ra's Blessing. And his God's Art is like pretty crazy. It is 4 and then 3 light, so a total of 7. But it says your life total becomes 4,000. That's pretty sweet, and that does count as gaining life, so you can banish a light gem, you know, using his second ability and, you know, nug something for 4,000, so that's pretty sweet. I've also seen some decks, and we're not running it, but I've seen some Wanderer decks, like, toying around with Volga, because Volga, like, whenever he takes damage, you can deal damage to your opponent equal to that amount. So I've seen some, like, you know, janky stuff where people try to, you know, gain 4,000 life and then, you know, one-shot your opponent. It's silly, but it's kind of cool. Next up, we run a 2 of Shinshin and Reiya, Acrobatic Twins. 1,000, 1,000 for 3 of any and 2 light. When it enters the field, you may banish 2 light gems. If you do, search your deck for a panda, put it into the field, then shuffle your deck. That's super sweet. This is like a pretty good 2-for-1. You always want to search your deck for a card. Usually, we're going to be getting the next card, but there's some other pandas that you can get, you know, just in case you need some stuff. Maybe you need to draw some cards. Maybe you need to gain some life or something. But, you know, it's a pretty versatile card, but we are only running 2 because the 5-drop is pretty hefty for this deck. Like I said, this is kind of like a mid-rangey style deck almost, but We do have some aggression. Anyway, this is a good one. And next up we have one of the best cards in this deck while simultaneously having some of the worst art. Anyway, this is Rose Quartz, the Panda Queen. She is a beast. Well, actually, she's a panda, but she's a 1000 panda. She costs 5 light, but don't let that fool you. It's actually not quite 5 light, because it says you pay 1 light less to play this card for each panda you control. And, you know, we always control at least one panda, you know, our ruler being a panda, so she costs 4. And then it gets reduced, you know, the further you go. So if you have 4 pandas on the field plus your ruler, she's free, which is awesome. Like, this is, you can do some huge snowbally turns with this card. And it says when this card enters the field, pandas you control gain +400 until end of turn. It's a huge pump. And then it also says at the end of your turn, recover all pandas you control. So you can just attack, you know, with impunity without having the fear of retaliation. So yeah, Rose Quartz is amazing. One of the cards that makes this deck, you know, do what it does. So yeah, you definitely need a full playset of Big Mama Panda. Next up, we have some chants. We're going to kick it off with Resuscitating Will. This card is excellent. It is a chant aura. Doesn't really matter for this deck. It costs 1 light as quick cast, and it says recover target J Resonator. So yeah, this is a way you can recover one of your dudes to smash in for more damage. That's basically what we're going to be using it for. I can't really see any other card using this. Not even Gem Mallet Panda. That would be a waste. So yeah, you're going to be using this to smash in, kill your opponent with a big beefy panda. Sometimes your J Ruler, sometimes, you know, Rose Quartz or some other panda, but pretty sweet. Next up, we have the only darkness card in the entire deck, which is a little deceptive because, you know, it doesn't actually cost darkness on this side. It is Flourishing Hope. It's a chant for 1 light, has quick cast. Target J Resonator gains. This card cannot be destroyed until end of turn, then remove this card inverted from the game. And then the inverted version makes your opponent banish some dude. So this is Burgeoning Despair. Costs 2 of any and 1 darkness. It has quick cast. It's an inverse, meaning, you know, it's this side. And it says play this ability only from your removed area. Target player banishes 2 resonators. So pretty sweet. This is the only, or rather, this is the only reason we are running any darkness stones at all, and it doesn't really matter too much if we don't have access to those, because the card still is good on its own, even without access to the Darkness Will. Next up, we have easily one of the best cards in the entire deck. We have Profitable Transactions. You probably don't even know what this card does, because it doesn't see any play anywhere outside of this deck. It is a quick cast chant for 1 light. It says choose up to 5. Banish a light gem. If you do, rest target resonator. That's not super good. Or banish a fire gem. If you do, this card deals 600 damage to your resonator. That's pretty good. That's one of the reasons why I like to choose fire for, you know, at the start of the game. Or banish a water gem. If you do, return target resonator to its owner's hand. Or banish a wind gem. If you do, draw a card. Or banish a darkness gem. If you do, your opponent discards a card. I like the discard. You know, I like the draw card. That's super sweet. I like dealing damage to your opponent's resonators. And I also like bouncing resonators. This card is super sweet. If you can get 4 of those abilities, that is absolutely crazy value. And we do have a lot of ways to generate gems in the deck. We normally won't be generating light gems with our abilities that let us choose because of this card. We'll likely be choosing ones that, you know, we want to use with this one. Usually fire, sometimes water, sometimes light, sometimes darkness. But light gems are kind of dime a dozen. And the other abilities are far more powerful for this deck, though resting a resonator so we can attack is also, you know, not too bad. And the final card in the deck is this really sweet Rainbow Shimmers, and we are running a full play set of these guys too. This is a quick cast chant for 1 light. It says choose 1. Look at the top X cards of your deck, where X is the number of gems you control. Put a card from among them into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any or in a random order. Or destroy target non-magic stone, non-J resonator entity with total cost X or less, where X is the number of gems you control. So basically, this is a really, really powerful search/draw spell, or one that can remove, like, you know, additions, that kind of stuff. Just a really, really good, efficient card. You know, this coupled with the Profitable Transactions makes you have a really low, powerful curve, which is nice. Because we're gonna be wanting to cast big resonators and smack our opponents in the face. So having our chance cost almost nothing is really good. And also they have really good effects. And there you guys have it. That is my Taegrus Pearl Shrine Lord of the Mountain deck. Well, not really my deck. It was one that was piloted to a top 8 finish at GP Rome, but major props to the person who piloted this deck and did not play Scheherazade. I think this deck is sweet. I think it's a lot of fun. I think this deck is really good for beginning players because it only uses Reiya cluster cards, and it has a starter deck ruler. Aside from that, it's also not super hard to pilot. You know, the hardest decisions come with like, what type of gem do I want to make in a certain situation, and planning ahead for the gems that you could possibly need. With that said, this deck is super sweet, and I also have my Time Spinning Witch deck coming up in the future. If you guys like the video, then maybe leave a like, comment, and or subscribe. Check out my Patreon, check out my Twitter, all that good shit. And regardless of what you do, guys, I hope you have a good one, and I hope to see you next time for some more Force of Will and trading card content. I'll see you guys later.